Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie Bree, and today is an interesting video because I want to talk about what makes the popular sci-fi franchises that we enjoy popular. Quick little background, brief. I studied film history and cinematography and things like that in college. Because I wanted to be a filmmaker. I've seen hundreds of movies. I've watched dozens of behind the scenes, documentaries, making ofs, all that stuff. Read interviews, read industry magazines. So, there's a lot of theories out there. A lot of different what makes specifically sci-fi so popular, especially the sci-fi franchises, the epic sci-fi franchises. We're talking the Terminators, the Star Wars, Star Trek, the MCU, the X-Men, Aliens, a little bit RoboCop, but let's pull RoboCop aside for a second because that one, that one never really got off the ground. It had a successful movie, but that. There are sci-fi franchises that are more popular than others, but we're also not talking about one-offs. Because there's a lot of sci-fi movies that are great movies. The Fifth Element, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and probably others that I can't think of off the top of my head, that never spawned a franchise, whether intentionally or just unintentionally. The studio never was interested, or the people who had the rights weren't interested, or audiences weren't interested, or whatever. But we do know that there are a lot of franchises that are successful, and they do have a lot in common. But when you start to look at the academic side of things, what they have in common starts, or at least what college professors and media critics tell you they have in common, starts to fall apart. But before we go any further, I got some good news. This video is actually kind of sort of sponsored. I'm not getting paid for this, but I made a deal with an author to read this copy to you, and I want you to listen to what I have to say because she's a good sci-fi writer, and that's why we're talking sci-fi today. So this is what she sent me, so bear with me. She said, Silfra never asked for power, but when an elder storm fractures the world around her, she must face a destiny she did not choose and horrors that no one believes exist. Alongside the enigmatic Hamari, the steadfast Elthar, and the ever-mysterious Bagraz, Silfra journeys through lands teeming with magic and monsters, while pursued by her childhood friend, the fanatical Fifth Order priest Jorah. Each choice could save lives or doom them all. In a world where magic bends reality and the past bleeds into the future, survival is only the beginning. She must master her power before the Alder storms consume everything she loves. Join Silfra in Fractured Ruin, a trans-led epic fantasy where identity and power collide. Step into the Alderstrom at DanielaWolf.com. I will put a link in the description of this video. Thank you, Daniela, for sending me that and agreeing to have me read your promo for your book on the show. Y'all, I'm friends with Daniela. Not friends, but like colleagues. She's an author, I'm an author, so we know each other. We've interviewed, we were involved in similar blogs and podcasts and things. She's a good author. You should definitely check her out. She is a personal friend, but I mean, she's also a great writer and a colleague and somebody that I know that I met through the industry. So she's a wonderful person. You should check out her book, and I will put a link in the description. I didn't want it to sound like she's not my friend. I meant she's not just my friend. And she's a friend that I met through this. Interviewing her for my podcast years ago is how we met, in fact. So check out her book. Definitely check it out. I will put a link in the description, and I hope that people will check it out. But now let's talk about the first thing academics will tell you that makes a successful sci-fi franchise or a successful sci-fi story that can turn into a franchise will be the hero's journey. You're going to hear that term a lot, hero's journey. Now, you're going to get different definitions of what that means. Essentially, the gist of it is an ordinary person gets thrust into an extraordinary situation, overcomes the odds, and saves the day, essentially. That's the Cliff's Notes version of it, or the what could fit in a tweet, if you will, version of the hero's journey. So my question is the hero's journey what makes sci-fi epics so popular? Like, are they all popular because of the hero's journey? Well, spoilers, the answer is no. And I can prove this very simply. One, out of all of the Star Wars sagas, you have the original trilogy, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. You have the prequel trilogy, The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. And then you have the Disney fan fiction. I don't even remember their subtitles. Who cares? The only one that you could make a case is the hero's journey is Luke Skywalker in the original trilogy. But let's put a pin in that for a second. We know you can't make that case at all for the MCU because there is no main hero. You have the Avengers, all 4 Avengers movies culminating in Endgame, but there's no main character going on a hero's journey in the Avengers. You kind of get character development, and you get characters who, grow as people, but that's not the definition of a hero's journey. Just because a character changes, or just because a character grows, doesn't mean they're the hero who went on a hero's journey. It's a very specific trope, and it does not apply to the MCU. It doesn't apply to the Guardians of the Galaxy. It doesn't apply to Thor. An unassuming person who rises against the odds. Thor's the fucking king of Asgard. He's not unassuming. Captain America, are you fucking kidding me? Star-Lord is half god, half human. No, that does not qualify. Spider-Man doesn't even... Well, the MCU Spider-Man doesn't even qualify as a hero's journey because he's getting all of his guidance and tech and all of his confidence and everything from Tony Stark and his power, his augmenting his powers. So Tony Stark is the one who's puppeteering Spider-Man. Spider-Man's not going on a hero's journey. He's just oh, my mentor is making me better. But he gets discovered. He doesn't really go on a quest. He just sort of gets thrust into it like everybody else. And spoilers, if you haven't seen all of the movies, Spider-Man is relatively inconsequential to the grand scheme of the outcome of the Infinity Saga. At least in terms of everybody involved. It's an ensemble. It's a massive ensemble. Now let's talk about Alien, right? You're gonna tell me Ripley isn't the hero's journey, right? She's a what? She's on an industrial mining ship. She gets trapped on a spaceship with an alien that's killing off her crew, and she has to overcome the... No, it's a slasher movie. She's the final girl. The final girl is a very specific trope that has some similarities superficially to the hero's journey, but is completely different. If you sat down and made a list of all the boxes you have to check for a character to fit under the hero's journey, she would check 1 or 2 boxes. She checks all the boxes of the final girl. But only in Alien. Once you get into the sequels, she's just another character. She's not a hero at all in Alien 3 or Resurrection. She's barely a protagonist. Barely a protagonist. But those movies are insanely popular. And Ripley's only in the first 4 out of 8 films, not counting the AVP films. Which, again, there's no hero's journey in AVP. What about RoboCop? No. He's a cop. He gets killed. He gets resurrected as a robot. That's a different trope. That's the Jesus Messiah trope. The chosen one. Only he's not really the chosen one, but that does fall under the Messiah trope. That's a separate trope, but it's overplayed in Hollywood, but I will argue that RoboCop does not qualify as the hero's journey. Neither does Mad Max, by the way. His family's killed in the first movie, and he's not on a quest to restore order to the world. He's not on a quest to defeat the bad guys. He's trying to fucking survive. He's on a quest to get more gasoline to put in his fucking car so he can drive in the desert to find more food so he can fucking live. He helps people along the way when it benefits him to do so. He doesn't shed his selfish, I'm only in it for the survival aspect until the 4th film, which was like 20, 30 years later. Well, those movies were already popular before that happened, so you can't shoehorn the hero's journey trope into the 3 films he was in that doesn't qualify. And then there's Star Trek. Who's the hero in Star Trek? Picard? Captain Kirk? Data? Spock? Tell me. Who's the hero on a journey to save... Who's going on the hero's journey in Star Trek? Nobody. There's no fucking hero's journey in Star Trek. None of them. None of them have. That's not what Star Trek is about. Yet Star Trek is insanely popular. The X-Men. Is it Wolverine? Are you fucking kidding me? He's on a selfish quest to get his memory back. And yeah, he bonds with a young girl, Rogue, along the way. And ultimately sacrifices his life to save everybody else. But that's because the woman he loves has turned evil, and if he doesn't kill her, she's going to kill literally everybody, and he knows she has to die one way or the other. He has nothing to live for, so he might as well kill her. And if he dies along the way, so be it. That's not a sacrifice for altruistic purposes. He's lost his will to live. He's lost his purpose in life, so he's just giving up. We see that carried out in Logan. He doesn't give a shit anymore. What about, I don't know, what Terminator? Well, no, I'll save you the trouble. The first Terminator, again, slasher movie. Sarah Connor is not the hero on a quest to better herself. She's the fucking final girl. She just happens to survive because she doesn't do anything stupid. Well, I mean, she kind of does. But she just happens to survive despite the stupid that she does, and then she learns to be less stupid. Terminator 2, there's no hero's journey. John Connor goes on, not even on a quest, he just goes to rescue it. He takes an indestructible killing robot to the prison where his mom is to rescue her, to free her, and then blow up the factory and then kill the evil bad robot, but then they go back to life is good. And then he goes on the run. But the Terminator sequels, we're not even going to touch on those. There's no hero's journey there. John Connor, you could definitely make the case of him being the chosen one. You could also try to talk about the Messiah complex situation, the Messiah situation. But definitely not a hero's journey. Jurassic Park, same thing. So, these are the absolute most popular sci-fi franchises. And the closest you get to a hero's journey is Star Wars from 1977. And that's only if you isolate the first film. Because once you follow the quest, follow Luke Skywalker through to the trilogy, and you get to the end of Return of the Jedi, you find out that he wasn't on the hero's journey. He was the chosen one. And now we're right back to the whole Messiah thing. So, maybe it's the Messiah complex? Because you notice I didn't bring up the Matrix, because we all know Neo was not on a hero's journey. He was the Messiah complex, right? That he's the chosen one. Same with Anakin Skywalker in the prequel trilogy. I mentioned that back at the start of the video. Well, no. Because here's why. Neo never accepts the fact that he's the one. He doesn't sacrifice himself at the end of the trilogy because it's the right thing to do. Because he knows he has to save humanity. He's in love with Trinity. And he makes the mistake in The Matrix Reloaded of not sacrificing himself to save humanity, and instead sacrificing humanity to hell with everybody else to save Trinity. Now, at the end of the third movie, she dies. And then, now faced with his whole purpose in life was to love her, because, they took him out of the Matrix, so he's not wandering aimlessly as a hacker, in 1990s, fucking rave culture. So now he's got nothing to live for. So at the end of it, he's like, fuck it. I'm gonna go just go out in a blaze of glory. And if I die, fuck it. If I die, I die. I got nothing to live for. And then he does ultimately sacrifice himself to save humanity, but only because he's got nothing to fucking lose. Nothing to live for. That's not the Messiah. That's not the hero on the hero's journey. And that sure as fuck ain't the chosen one. That's just a selfish asshole who ultimately sacrifices himself because he's got nothing fucking better to do and nothing else to lose. So that's not why the Matrix movies are popular. Again, Jurassic Park, there really isn't, there isn't a main character in really any of the Jurassic Park movies. It's all ensemble. And there is the key to the success of these films. It isn't the hero's journey. It isn't the Messiah. It isn't the chosen one. When you set aside the first entry in the Alien franchise, Alien, and isolate that as a horror movie, and then you set that aside and you follow the through line to the rest of the franchise, you'll notice there's a pattern within the rest of the Alien franchise that doesn't really apply to the first film. And this is the same pattern that applies to the rest of the Terminator franchise that doesn't apply to the first film. Because, again, the first film is a slasher movie. Same with Alien. So, when did Alien, the franchise, change? When did it stop being a slasher movie? Well, the immediate sequel, Aliens. It's a sci-fi, space marine epic, not quite space opera, but a big sci-fi action movie, right? With what? An ensemble cast. There is really no singular main character. Each character that you would identify as the main character isn't truly the main character. Because the other characters, not only do they get equal screen time most of the time in these franchises, but also their storylines are just as crucial to the outcome of the overarching story as the alleged main character. So again, we brought up the Matrix, right? Well, Neo, but there's also Trinity and Morpheus and Tank and Dozer and everybody else all around Neo. And while Neo is the face of the Matrix franchise, go back and watch those movies. He doesn't get all of the screen time, and the other characters' stories are just as important as his, and their actions are just as crucial as his. Same thing with the MCU. I've already debunked the hero. That is absolutely ensemble. Same with X-Men. Spider-Man, it's a little closer, especially the first two Sam Raimi films. It kind of falls apart after that. Spider-Man 3 and then the two Amazing Spider-Man films definitely don't fit the hero's journey or the Messiah complex or the Chosen One. Those are just action movies with a guy that has superpowers. What about Star Trek? Star Trek is absolutely ensemble. Yes, Kirk is like, again, the face of Star Trek in TOS and Picard in Next Gen and etc., etc. But I have not seen all of the Star Trek that there is to see, but I've seen enough of it to know that there's no main character in Star Trek. Every viewer of Star Trek has their character that they latch onto as that's their favorite character. Same way with The Matrix, Jurassic Park, Terminator, the Aliens movies. RoboCop's the main character on RoboCop, but that one's a little iffy. That's not really a big sci-fi blockbuster epic. That's not even a family-friendly movie. But RoboCop is more of a social commentary type situation, which we are going to come back to in a second. So now we have, let's go back to Star Wars. Luke Skywalker is not the main character of Star Wars. Neither is Han Solo. Neither is Obi-Wan Kenobi, or Princess Leia, or Lando Calrissian, or Chewbacca, or R2-D2, or C-3PO. They're all important. You can even throw in Yoda, starting with Empire Strikes Back. None of them are the singular main character. Now, we don't even start off with Luke Skywalker. We start the movie following R2-D2 and C-3PO. And then we get handed off, and then we follow Princess Leia for a little bit. And then we get handed off, and we follow Luke a little bit. And then we follow Luke and Han, but then Luke and Han split once they get to the Death Star, and we follow Han for a little bit. Han and Chewie, we follow R2-D2 and 3PO for a little bit. We follow Luke and Leia for a little bit. We follow Ben Kenobi for a little bit. The point is, there is no one main character. The same thing happens in Empire Strikes Back. Yes, Luke is on Dagobah doing his thing, but Han and Leia and 3PO are off doing their thing. And then Lando comes in later, but then you also have Obi-Wan and Yoda popping up doing their thing. You're not following one main character. And that is where I believe all of the academics are wrong. And I think what really makes these sci-fi epic blockbuster franchises, now I'm not talking about singular one-offs like, The Fifth Element or, Avatar that later became a franchise, but we don't talk about Avatar because, it doesn't really break the rules, but it's its own little thing. But, excuse me. I'm going to make the point that I think what makes the most successful franchises, the ones that have staying power, the ones that make $500 million or more at the cinema and on and merchandise and video games and comic books and action figures and TV spin-offs and all this other shit. The ones that transcend their original movie and become a part of the lexicon and our pop culture language. These movies are ensembles. Even the Ghostbusters. Who's the hero in the Ghostbusters? Is it Ray? Egon? It sure as hell ain't sleazy ass Venkman. No. The reason why these movies are successful, they're engineered specifically not to have a single main character with a cast around them. This one character goes on the hero's journey, or this one character is the Messiah or the chosen one. No, it's not that at all. And all these lame-ass academics that are trying to make it that are the same ones that'll tell you that Superman is just Hercules for the modern times. No, that's not the case at all. Why these movies are successful is because there is the underdog character, right? The nerdy, geeky, less charismatic character in every one of these franchises. That the nerdy, geeky, underdog, less popular viewer in the audience, you, me, everybody, are going to latch onto. And to those people, that's their favorite character. That's the main character. But to the, the strong woman types, the females who want to be empowered and believe that female empowerment is a thing, they're going to latch on to the strong female characters in these movies. You know, the Ripleys, the Sarah Connors, Princess Leia, the Blue Girl in Avatar, Trinity in The Matrix, so on and so forth. The dude bros, the badass jock types, the ones that are all about, I can do anything, and they're all about confidence, but they're overconfident, cocky, arrogant. They're gonna latch on to the Han Solos. They're gonna latch on to the Tony Starks, the whatever the fuck his name is that rides the motorcycle in the Jurassic World movies. There's always somebody in the film for whoever you are in the audience to latch onto. Some people identify with more than one character. Some people don't identify with anybody in the movie, and either they don't end up liking that particular movie because they don't identify with anybody, or B, they just find it entertaining. You don't always have to identify with a character. But I argue that the reason why these movies are so successful is because they do cater to a big enough of an audience, because they have characters that appeal to different segments of the audience. So, if the only people that are going to go see Fast and Furious movies are the dude bros, all the dude bros are going to go see all of the Fast and Furious movies, but all the geeks are going to, sit at home not interested. Right? All of the geeks are going to go see, trying to think of one, Mission to Mars, or Gravity. But the dude bros aren't watching Gravity. That movie would go over their head. They wouldn't be able to make sense out of it. What do you call it? I guess in the 80s we would have called them like the preppies, the rich, prissy, well-off, I don't want to say high society, but the more well-off, the popular. We'll say, the popular, the princess types. They're going to go watch, maybe Titanic, or, the Barbie movie, or whatever. But they're not interested in Triple X. They're not interested in 007. So these movies, Star Wars, sort of Star Trek, the Jurassic movies, the Alien movies, the MCU movies, the Guardians of the Galaxies, they're tailored in such a way to draw in the widest audience. Because the dude bros are still going to have something to enjoy. The geeks and the nerds and the dorks and the outcasts are going to have something to enjoy. The young girls that are looking for a strong female, empowered female role model are going to find something to enjoy, etc., etc. And these movies are tailored, on the surface, very superficially. Some of them have very faint hints at the hero's journey, or the Messiah, or the chosen one. Just enough for the academics to lose their shit and write essays about these fucking movies. Now, I could throw all of that aside, and I could posit that none of that matters as long as the effects look good, right? As long as the movie is pretty, right? As long as it's a spectacle that amazes your senses, it tickles your sight, your auditory, your emotions. It just trips up all of your senses and lights up all of your neurons in your brain. That's all that matters. But we have a long-ass list of movies that do all of that and fucking failed. Because you also have to have another key component that I haven't even brought up. And that is the fact that regardless of your preference in what you want from a character or a story, regardless of your specific interests in a theme or a setting, and regardless of your opinions on practical versus visual effects, all of these movies do have something else in common. They're good fucking movies. And that's the key that makes a successful sci-fi franchise. The first movie has to stick the landing. You don't launch a successful sci-fi franchise if the first movie bombs. You can. It could theoretically be done. I don't know if I could make the case that it has ever been done, but it could be done. But you have to work a whole hell of a lot harder. It's not as hard in subgenres like horror or fantasy or rom-coms, because those are a smaller audience. Those people have, I don't want to say lower standards, but they have specific standards. They're willing to look past the bad acting, the paper-thin plot, if it even has a plot. And they're willing to look past the less than stellar special effects as long as they look good enough. Because they're there for X, Y, or Z. The rom-com fans are there for the fairy tale romance. They don't want a realistic plot with likable, believable characters. They want a fucking fairy tale romance. That's why people who watch rom-coms do. That's why they watch rom-coms. They know it's not believable or realistic. They don't want believable or realistic. They want the fucking fairy tale. Because it gives them something to aspire to. It fuels their fantasies, their daydreams. Same thing with horror fans. Horror fans don't give two flying fucks if your Jason movie has a plot or your characters have personalities. We want teenagers getting killed in brutal ways. That's it. As long as your movie does that, we don't give a fuck if you call it Jason Takes Manhattan when it's really Jason Takes a Boat to Saskatchewan or whatever the fuck it is. Nobody cares. But mass audiences generally do care if the movie sucks. And audience scores and critic scores don't always see eye to eye. But all of these movies, the successful franchises, have one thing in common. And none of them have an F or thereabouts in their audience score or their critic score. Not the ones that are successful at becoming franchises. Sometimes the first movie will get an A plus or an A minus, and then subsequent films will fall off a cliff. But you still have to have C's and B's in order for the franchise to continue. And you can translate those letter grades into numbers however you want, stars or, math, whatever. But the point is, once you parse it down to, an average, below average, and above average, no sci-fi franchise that has ever had staying power had a below average first entry. Now, they may have average or below average sequels and various degrees of average to above average, reboots and requels, etc., etc. But if your first movie sucks, you don't get a franchise. Period. I don't care who you are. And in all of these cases, Batman, Iron Man, X-Men 2000, Spider-Man 2002, Aliens 1979, Star Wars 1977, Terminator 1984, Jurassic Park 1993. In all of these cases, the first movie in their respective franchise, even if it wasn't the biggest moneymaker in the total franchise, Star Wars being probably the exception, even if it wasn't like an A plus, I guarantee you it's at the minimum a B minus, at the very fucking minimum, which is still a goddamn good movie. Now, I didn't want to bring up Mad Max because that's not really a sci-fi epic blockbuster action franchise like the rest of these I've been talking about. That's more of a dystopian future type situation, which is also what RoboCop is. Which is why I said we're going to briefly come back to the whole RoboCop not being really what we're talking about. It is sci-fi. It's an action movie. It has some of the earmarks of what we would classify as a blockbuster, but it's a dystopian future. Some of these sci-fi epics do have dystopian futures, or some type of dystopian situation within their within the confines of their overarching story. But most of them have, at the end of the day, a message of hope. In Star Wars, the bad guys blow up the good guys blow up the Death Star and save the universe. In Jurassic Park, the good guys leave the dinosaurs on the island and thwart the bad guys' plans to get the dinosaurs off the island. People die along the way, and there's conflict along the way. In Star Trek, the good guys always find the MacGuffin that takes care of the super god that is actually just some kid in his basement bored, and he has some kind of weird MacGuffin device. But they always find their MacGuffin device to overcome his. In the Matrix, they defeat the computer, Terminator, they beat Skynet. Aliens, Alien 3, Alien Resurrection, they always kill the xenomorph. They don't always have happy endings. You can have a tragic ending and still have the net effect being a positive overall for the rest of society, humanity, or whatever. You can still have your beloved character that you've been following, whichever one they are, die along the way. Now, this does not apply at all to other genres, like action movies, and I'm not talking sci-fi action, like, comic book movies, like Batman, where they're like sort of sci-fi, sort of action. I'm talking like Lethal Weapon, Die Hard, Triple X, Fast and the Furious. That's a separate category of movie. They have a separate category of rules, what makes them successful. And I'm not talking about that today. But your big sci-fi franchises, the ones that have staying power, the ones that make $1 billion over the course of their lifespan or more, and not just the ones that spawn merchandise, toys, comic books, action figures, video games, etc., etc., and good quality whatever that merchandise is that appeals to people, that is taken seriously by the people doing the merchandising because they, respect the quality of the product. They all have one thing in common. Well, more than one, but the big thing they have in common is their first entry was a fucking good movie. The Matrix, Terminator, Alien, Star Wars, Jurassic Park. These are goddamn classics for a fucking reason. These are the movies that launched undying franchises. Star Trek's a little different because it actually started out as a TV series, but it got movies, and it has transcended the TV series that it started as, so I'm lumping it in with this other stuff, but it followed a different path. Then you have one-offs, like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Passengers, The Fifth Element, I brought it up more than once, that don't spawn a franchise. Well, there's various reasons for that. Sometimes they're a self-contained story, and there's nothing at all wrong with leaving a self-contained story alone. It has a beginning, middle, end, wrap it up, roll credits, we're done. Move on to watch something else. Now, some out there try to take a franchise that didn't have a good entry, that audiences were a little iffy on, and they try to force it. They try to make it into a blockbuster, and it doesn't always work. These are things like, and I'm going to harp on it, but I'm going to mention it and move on. Tron, Jupiter Ascending, the one was it John Carter? I think is what it was called, John Carter. And a few others, where the studios, or whoever it was, thought they were launching what would be the next big franchise. And it didn't stick the landing. And that's because the first movie, in all of those instances, kind of sucks. Yes, they, over time, some of them, especially Tron, form a cult following, and then over time that cult spreads, and then, builds up an audience, and there's enough of an interest to try again. But a lot of times it gets really forced. And then sometimes you have something like, Ready Player One, or you have Alita Battle Angel, where, yeah, the first movie is fantastic, but there's so many moving parts behind the scenes that make it difficult to bring those sequels out. And so those franchises don't always hit it off right away because they wait too long to get the sequel out. Sometimes that works. In the case of Avatar, they waited too long to get the sequel out, but enough time had passed, people were now going into anticipation based on nostalgia and excitement. That can work, but sometimes you can wait too long, and then people just lose interest. I don't have a winning formula for when a franchise is going to be successful, or when a movie is going to spawn a franchise. Aside from, regardless of the plot, the characters, the setting, the tropes, etc., 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 the first movie has to be good. Period. You can't launch a franchise off of a cult movie that becomes popular down the road. That first movie has to be good. It doesn't have to be a massive $1 billion hit right out the gate, but it still has to be good enough to, make a massive amount of money for the studio relative to its budget. To not just be profitable, but to be extra profitable. To be profitable enough to make up for some of the losses of some of the others. You know what I mean? It has to be like the type of cash cow that the studio can latch onto and say, okay, this is going to make us money, let's keep going. And that doesn't happen if the first movie isn't good. And I hate to break it to you academic types, but none of them are the fucking hero's journey. The hero's journey is a goddamn myth. It's a lie. You've been deceived by stuffy old college professors that are not in tune to pop culture, but they, in their cobweb heads, think they are because they think they're smarter than everybody when they're really not.